Welcome to the Emmanuel Christian School State of the School Address 2024. I want to promote greater communication, transparency, and partnership between the school and our families. I will address finances, academics, staffing, and our current building plans to give a big picture snapshot of where we are now. Further, I want to explain our vision for the future and how we plan to get from where we are now to where we are going. We'll start with finances. Emmanuel has historically struggled to meet our operating costs. We are a ministry, and for more than 50 years worked to keep costs as reasonable as possible for potential families. We believe every Christian child should have a Christian education, and finances should not prevent any qualified student from attending. This resulted in a complicated web of category discounts where aid was distributed based on things like having a sibling or being a pastor, rather than based on actual need. We are changing that and now have a need-based application for financial aid. We distributed over $100,000 in financial aid this academic year, but not always strategically. We are taking the steps required to make sure financial aid goes to those who need it while keeping classical Christian education accessible. We are still in the process of making our operating income match our operating expenses. By God's grace, we may do that in 2024-2025. We are growing, but growth requires funding. We often have to incur expenses at the beginning and end of the year, but income rolls in on a different schedule. This requires careful cash flow management. Our goal is to create long-term stability. If we are going to excel as a classical Christian school, we need sufficient financial stability to anticipate and respond to volatility. This will take time and occur in steps. First, we are going to build our cash reserve to that standard threshold of a 3 to 6 month cash reserve. Eventually, we aim to create and build an endowment. We must not be tossed back and forth by every wind, but act with genuine purpose for our long-term viability. I believe we have sufficient cash on hand and expected income for a strong launch into 2024-2025. By God's grace, during my tenure, we have always met payroll. We've given Christmas bonuses every year and are profoundly thankful to those who contribute to those bonuses, and I've been able to offer teachers modest raises each year. I'm not close to paying them what they deserve, but we are moving in the right direction. Some of our growth is fueled by the West Virginia Hope Scholarship. But we know this scholarship remains inaccessible to about 60% of our families. We are actively exploring avenues to make that accessible to you. The Attorney General issued an opinion that students can engage in dual enrollment to become qualified for the West Virginia Hope Scholarship. There may be a way for us as a school to accommodate families and help you get the Hope Scholarship. But doing so will require help, resources, and significant logistical planning, because it would require dual enrollment, being enrolled at Emmanuel at the same time as being enrolled at, for example, an online public charter school. This brings us to academics. At the end of 2020, the Emmanuel Christian School Board voted to pursue a classical model of Christian education. I was recruited to help make that vision a reality. I get the sense that some of our families, particularly those who were already enrolled at that time, still have questions about that change and what it means. First, classical Christian education is pursuing wisdom and virtue through the great books and the liberal arts. By liberal, we are not talking about politics, but about liberty. The liberal arts free us as people. They free us to be truly human. They are the liberating arts. They are a tool for forming habits and desires that orient the heart toward Christ. So you hear about grammar, logic, and rhetoric. These are the trivium, the first 3 of the 7 liberal arts. They are the basis of classical Christian education in primary and secondary school. Grammar school is what most people call elementary school, K through 6th. Logic occurs around middle school, 7th and 8th grade, and rhetoric is associated with high school. These are not merely phases or stages of education, they are subjects in their own right. We teach grammar as a subject. Students learn English grammar. And grammar is the primary focus of elementary education. Not merely the grammar of English, as important as that is, but the grammar of every subject, the basic language needed to talk about science or history or math. The basic language of math is arithmetic. We use methods appropriate to the student's developmental level, such as memorization, chants, building collections, narration and dictation, field trips, copywork. At the logic phase, we teach logic as a subject in its own right, and we teach the logic of each subject, the why of each subject. What is the internal logic of this subject? How does it work? On what assumptions does it rest? What does it accept as proof and why? Why math? Why literature? Why music and art? Students begin to evaluate and assess ideas and form their own conclusions. At this stage, we use discussion, debate, research, timelines, charts, and Socratic inquiry. As students get older, we focus on rhetoric, both as a subject and as a way of bringing all the other subjects together. The main aim of rhetoric is synthesis, and students are required to speak. High school seniors complete a senior thesis. That is about a 25-page paper that they have to present physically, orally. They have to present their thesis and then be questioned on it by a group of faculty. All the while, we are feeding the mind on really big ideas through great literature, with a particular focus on the great books. Classical education was the education of the founding fathers of the United States. How do you create someone who can write a document as elegant as the Declaration of Independence, and who simultaneously has the courage to fight a war to obtain the promises of liberty? You classically educate them. Classical education is the education that made Oxford, Cambridge, Harvard, and Princeton world-class institutions of higher learning, even if some of them have since abandoned the model responsible for their global reputations. You do still see their Latin mottos, for example. We do all of this in pursuit of Christian wisdom, Proverbs 1:1-7. The beginning of wisdom is the fear of the Lord. If we are to study and understand God's world and His Word, we must begin with the fear of the Lord. We must cultivate wisdom, virtue, and character. We have to form habits that build the right sensibilities, both academic and ethical. We want our students to be lifelong learners, and the Trivium equips students with the tools of learning to master any subject and excel in any discipline or trade. Many of you may still wonder why the change to classical Christian education is necessary. On a pragmatic level, the school was dying. To continue on the same path would have been the end of Emmanuel Christian School. That doesn't make the transition easy, but it does help us understand why it was necessary. When I came in 2021, if enrollment remained stagnant, we couldn't have made it. Greater than the pragmatic reality, classical Christian education is the best education possible this side of eternity. We want to create a world-class institution of primary and secondary learning in Clarksburg. Over the previous century, we've seen many educational fads take root, fail, and be abandoned, only to be replaced with some new fad that takes root, fails, and is ultimately abandoned. Classical Christian education is perennial education because it deals with perennial human ideas and issues. It entails a realistic appraisal of human nature. Classical thought gave us universities, the scientific method, and the Renaissance, and particularly classical thought driven by Christian motivation gave us universities, the scientific method, and the Renaissance. If we hope to maintain the institutions that constitute civil society and secure America's place as a beacon of hope in the world, we have to educate our children in the principles and ideals upon which the American cause is built. Now, some questions about the change to classical deal with curriculum, and this is an issue that has caused some people to walk away, as we knew that it would. I'm going to tackle this head on. First, some express concern that classical is a step down from a curriculum like Abeka or BJU. That is not true. Abeka and BJU are fine Christian curriculums, but they have organized themselves around what's called a spiral method. If you envision something like a spiral staircase where you as you go up, you go over the same spot, but at a higher level over and over and over again until you get all the way to the top. That's the idea of a spiral method of education. You go over a concept, but you don't spend too much time on it because you, in theory, continue moving up, and then you'll revisit that concept at a higher level later on, and later on again, and later on again, and so on and so forth. And that is one way to approach education, but that's not our conviction about the best way to approach education. We are committed to teaching students from a mastery approach in most subjects, and to teaching students the greatest ideas in the history of the world. To that end, we are going to start Latin in second grade next year. We're likely going to begin cursive in first grade. Our middle schoolers have already begun taking Greek. Our math curriculum predominantly uses a mastery approach, especially in the grammar school. This is, again, in contrast to the spiral method of Common Core, or the new math that many parents have expressed frustration in understanding because it's taught so differently than how we learned math. Our students read Shakespeare, Dante, and Augustine. Younger students begin reading chapter books by second grade, but even many first graders have expressed an interest in challenging themselves with chapter books. On every point, we are raising the expectation of students at Emmanuel. But I do admit readily, and in fact I'll advertise, that the classical Christian method is different. And you want it to be different, because most of the models around us are failing. Now, sometimes those higher expectations will feel easier to students because we are committed to using instructional methods suited to their nature, natural interests, and developmental level. If you teach a kid to memorize something through a song, they don't even really think it's work. We are recapturing the classical idea of schole, which is to say, restful learning. Students learn better when they are comfortable, when they want to be here, and they have high ideals to which they aspire.